Soldiers speak out. We can tell the truth of what we've seen. We are not liars. Soldiers speak out. We have a duty to all children and to their futures.
Yeah, I want to thank the choir. That was amazing. You know, it's when you think about how peace manifests and how your work goes. You know, when you hear things like this and hear this stuff going on this weekend, you know, it's enough to just change your mind, I think, a little bit. But I ask more of all of you because we're activists and the organizers. You know, we got to do more. We got to have that manifest into action, and you know, we have to take action to make sure that that peace exists. And how does that manifest? You know, how does it manifest in your neighborhood? You know, with the neighbors who live around you. How does that manifest in your home? And how you treat the people closest to you, because often those are the people that we abuse the most. And how does that manifest in our hearts and how we treat ourselves? And you know, we got a country where two people that have consented to love each other are afraid to give physical contact to each other, to just hold each other or touch one's shoulder or hold hands, because they're afraid of being physically beaten. And if we can't stop things like that in our own communities, it's very difficult to find a way to fight for peace abroad. So when a group like that comes up here and sings and you know, shares, everywhere I go, everywhere I've gone in the world, people share their culture in a lot of different ways, and you know, they share it with stories and their history, and they share it with the food that they share, and they share it with song and art. And I think it's just a privilege to be able to hear the songs that they've selected and chosen to express themselves to us. And it was really amazing. But you know, I wish they just close this thing out. We should be, you know, right now I'm so motivated to go out and do these Connect the Dots campaigns. I'm itching to get out of here. But thanks for coming in for the closing Plenary, and I know it's the same folks up here on stage speaking again, but yeah, I love you all, and everyone deserves to be loved, and listen to the last things that we have to say.
Hello everybody, is this on? Yeah, okay.
That was really great, Garrett, especially connecting the part about what you said about people who committed to love each other but being afraid to touch each other because they might be hurt just because they love each other and they touched each other. That's so sad. And it's so real, you know. And I mean, it's not what I was going to say, so I'm kind of riffing off what you just said. For a long time, when I was a kid, and you know, I'm kind of stuck on the idea that I'm getting older, and now I'm 55. Next year I'll be saying I'm 56. But so when I was younger, and you know, 8 years old, 1972, 10 years old, whatever, being gay was me understanding a person being gay, for example, right? And what does that mean? But I always talk about my mother. My mother always taught us to respect everybody and love everybody. But we didn't have any conversations about whether or not being gay was right or wrong or anything. But since you're supposed to love everyone and respect everyone, so there's this contradiction, right? About if you're gay, something's wrong with that. But I did know, and I guess I came to the conclusion when I was in junior high school or high school, that finding people who love each other is really hard, and it's like the greatest gift or the best thing that can happen in your life is find somebody who loves you, so how much could it matter what their gender is? You know? So that kind of made me come to this conclusion that this idea that a person being gay or homosexual or whatever was wrong didn't make any sense. Because, I mean, it's two people finding each other and they love each other, and that's the bottom line, right? So it just kind of came clear to me kind of early, just based on that. You know, so anyway. So sacred lives. Well, I was just thinking about what does that mean? And I think when I first was thinking about it, I was thinking about life versus lives, and lives meaning people's lives are sacred. But then as the weekend went on, I started thinking about, well, lives can mean different things. So I just looked it up while the choir was singing, actually. And I just want to read you the definition of something. So according to Wikipedia's Oxford thing, not Wikipedia, I'm sorry, Google, of course. The first, I looked up life and lives, and they have interchangeable meaning. It's exact same meaning was in both of them. So life, the number one meaning, the condition that distinguishes animals and plants from inorganic matter, including the capacity for growth, reproduction, functional activity, and continual change preceding death. So that was for life and life. And then the third definition, the period between the birth and death of a living being, especially a human being. So the reason I was thinking about that is because when we think lives are sacred, are we just talking about not killing someone and that life in terms of not killing them is sacred? Or that life is sacred as in life itself existing is sacred? Or are we, well, sure, we're talking about that, right? But we also need to understand that period between being born and death, that period is sacred. So for me, when I think about, okay, yeah, life itself is sacred, but when I start thinking about that period of time is also sacred, then that means that I have to treat people a certain way in that period of time. Because if it's sacred to me, that means I have to act as if it's sacred. I don't know if that makes sense.
Totally.
Right.
Yeah.
So, and so, you know, as a soldier, as a veteran, and I talked the other day about us being death dealers when we were in the military. And the bottom line is we did take people's lives. We took their life, but we took their lives too. We took that period away. And everyone's probably seen This a Wonderful Life, and how Jimmy Stewart was like, I guess he wished he was dead or something, but the angel came and showed him what his life would have been like, not his life, what other people's lives would have been like without him, without that period of time, right? So we also took people's lives have a ripple effect, which is what it was about, right? So we snatched out that ripple. I hadn't really thought about that. But we replaced it with a different ripple, a less active ripple. An empty space. So that's another reason we have to do what we do. I mean, I feel like I'm doing it to make amends to some degree. Obviously, I'm also doing it because in order for that space for people to be right, for it to be sacred, I have to fight, I have to struggle, so that that space will be sacred, my own space. You know, if I, let's just be selfish for a second. We all want our own space to be sacred, so we have to struggle to make that, right? I mean, even if it's just sacred to myself, I need to be sacred to myself. I need to love myself, be sacred to myself. But then also everybody else is sacred too. So I also do it for that, not only amends. So we talked a lot this week about how we treat each other. And again, it gets back to that sacredness, how we treat each other, remembering that that space is sacred, and how I act towards you and how you act towards me. Are we violating that sacredness or not? So I'm going to talk a moment about women and how we men are violating that space. So here was Garrett, I think, at the beginning of, or someone at the beginning of the convention, talked about how women, or not just women, could be a man too, but there's been reports of sexual harassment or sexual assault or something at our conventions. And I did have a woman come to me and tell me that she was there was a past. So when, you know, one of those little comments that guys make, like, it sure does look good from here, you know, that kind of thing. But that took her back to a previous time when she was in the military, that she had to face a similar comment while she was deployed, just arrived. So what I guess what I'm saying is, while it was a violation of that time and space between her death, her life beginning, and whenever that time will be when she dies, when she was on deployment, and then and this is not the place this should be happening, she was taken back there by a comment. I really don't understand. I mean, all kinds of things go through my head. You know, I got the award and everything, that's nice, but I'm not saying, right? So things go through my head. So I don't understand why, there's a lot of things I just don't say. You know, so I just don't really understand that. I'm really confused about people not being able to control their mouths. You know, so we need to be able to do that. And we men have to hold other men accountable. Even when they say things to us, that they say, oh, you know, so-and-so, hey man, don't say that. You know, we need to work on that. And I don't always do it. And it's a skill, so you can't always do it, or you start not being able to have a discussion. But what we have to do is make it so that people know, well, while I'm with him, I probably shouldn't say this. And then if a bunch of us are doing that, then they're not going to be able to say it because they're around a bunch of guys and they can't say it. You know, and that's how we help each other. So we really, really need to work on that. We really need to work on that. And one way to remember that is we're trying to make sure that time is sacred for ourselves and for the woman. So, Loke, and when I speak of her, I'm speaking of Ruth, who told us last night that she's not any longer going by the name Ruth. She's going by Loke. Am I saying that correct? Yeah. So this morning I asked her, because I want to be clear that's the case, and she said yes, and she was doing that because she was trying to make it easy for people to say her name. And people like me, I have trouble saying all kinds of people's names, sure, but people like me. And so she wasn't going to do that anymore, which is good. So I should also say, it seems like people sometimes have trouble saying my name. My name is Michael, not Mike. It's kind of funny. But it's because we all been culturalized into changing people's names sometimes. And in some ways it's because Mike means I'm closer to you, or, we're closer friends, except my name's not Mike. And I didn't know that was an issue until I got out of the military, because they called me by my last name. You know? And then I got out of the military, and all of a sudden there's this thing. I'm introducing myself as Michael, and people shortening the mic. I was trying to figure out what the hell was going on. And I actually had someone admonish me. Told me I was wrong and that people should hear us. Like, well, you said your name was Robert, I'll call you Steve. You know? But it's funny the struggles you have to go through, something as silly as that, and most of us just give in, right? And I even have some people, because they seem not be able to stop, and I just don't need to continue to do it. But generally, I try not to give in. And we've been culturalized to do it too. It's not, you know what I'm saying? So I don't know if that actually has anything to do with what I'm talking about here, other than, I guess, just trying to say people's names right and trying to remember to say low-K. And like she said, it's not low-key, you know? But one of the things, I guess, talking about sacred, and I don't want to go on and on, I'm sorry if I am, that over the years, when Native Indigenous people of the U.S. Come to our conventions and other places and speak their language, and I know that our country, the U.S., or the U.S. government, tried to erase their culture, put people in schools, as Joe talked about, try to make them speak English, and then there was a movement for people to reclaim their language and reconnect. And I think about, I just see such power in that, just speaking, because there's the ancestral connection, because the language has been spoken for thousands of years or hundreds of years, and then you're speaking it now. So you're saying the words that someone said, long time ago. I can't do that. And I was thinking last night, and it started coming to me at the open plenary, but I guess it's been bubbling in my head, that I don't know exactly what my ancestral homeland is. I guess I could find out through like DNA and do a whole bunch of research and all that. It would be an effort. So that means I gotta figure, am I gonna go through that effort? And then if I find it, I have to try to learn the language, and there's another way to maybe reconnect to my ancestral heritage. And so it makes me, I felt a little jealous. I actually started to feel a little jealous yesterday. That I don't have that. But she's such a presence, right? She's so powerful. When I came into the hotel and I saw her, but I didn't recognize her, I kind of recognized her, but I felt her energy immediately. So I just said hello, and then somebody recognized who she was. I was like, oh, that's what I kind of recognized. But if I hadn't, I still would have felt that energy. And I guess I'm like, I would like to capture some of that, some of that, not from her, but mine, and does her having connected to so much through her language and her cultural ancestry, is that part of that power? And I'm sure it is. But for me to recapture that or to find that, it'd be such work. And I guess what made me think about how the sacredness of my life, how it's been disrupted as to what kind of life it could be. People of color's lives being disrupted and not being held as sacred, and maybe not even knowing how sacred we are. Much of my community not understanding the sacredness of it. How my people we were brought here and smashed together, culture erased, language erased, heritage erased, everything, and then we had to reinvent ourselves. And we're in this constant reinvention because none of us have been here that long. So we had to create our sacredness. Of course, our life was our life, as like I said, the organicness of it was sacred. But the time between being born and the time of death is sacred, but it wasn't being treated sacredly at all, right? So I realized that our struggle as Black people in this country is a struggle for sacredness, to be recognized as sacred, to have sacredness in that time and space. And sometimes we don't treat each other as sacred as we should, and many, many times we do, of course. But that's the case for, I think, everyone moving outside of people of color. One of the things the system has done, it did the same thing to white people, in terms of taking white people and smashing white people together, erasing, not completely, because most of you know, I'm sure, to some degree, where your ancestry is, but how much of a connection do you actually have to the ancestry? People, I'm sure, differently, different ways, and maybe I'm just stereotyping, so excuse me if I don't know what I'm talking about, right?
You do.
Okay. Right. But if you're German, if you have German ancestry, right, and there's a lot of people in the United States that have German ancestry, I bet you don't know German. You know what I mean? Right. And so my point is that this system has done similar things to all of us. But it doesn't tell us that, right? It wants us to think that we're not as similar as we really are. And it doesn't want white people to know the oppression that they really have faced. And then they want Black people to think of our oppression in a totally different way and not be able to connect to your oppression. So if you don't know your oppression, you can't connect to my oppression because you don't see it reflected, because you don't even know nothing about it, right? So that's how much the erasing has happened. And then I don't know anything because you think Black people trying to read about white people's past and oppression, we get enough of your history just being in school, right? So we're not trying to uncover your oppression. Right, so I guess, again, getting back to the sacredness of our lives from being born to our deaths and how all of us are disconnected from who we are, you know, which disconnects us from each other. And the theme and Ruth Locke made me think about all this. So I guess that's really it. I just wanted to, I know Locke said that we need to take care of women. And the 7 generations. And I guess I want to say this, because I'm working out what does that mean, because I know, lastly, somewhat with feminism and the idea of how the system has wanted to keep women in the home, and now I'm working this out, so this might not make any sense, but wanted to keep women in the home, and there was a pushback, and women have been able to be their individual selves, right? Which is what we all need to be. But at the same time, I know there was this period of time where there was kind of looking down on women who wanted to stay home. You know, so there's this tension, right? And also, if I have expressed before, a belief I have is that bringing up children is the most important aspect of our society. But then someone said, well, that diminishes like a woman that can't have a child. And I'm saying, but I want people to understand, it's not about that, it's about bringing up children, whether or not it's a woman or a man. So it's not diminishing a woman that can't have a child, it's about our society and parenting. I can't have a child, but I can bring up a child if I'm a parent. So I was just thinking about the 7 generations and the importance of treating women, not diminishing anybody, but life does begin with women. And if we're not treating children and women, as she said, correctly and sacred, then we're not treating life sacred. We're not treating life right. We're not treating ourselves right. So I guess at the end of the day, our work is to make life sacred, but also that time from the beginning to the end sacred as well. So, thanks.
Thank you. We're going to have some times, I think, for questions afterwards. Is that okay? Okay. Yeah, I was thinking a lot about what you're talking about my identity, and it's funny how oftentimes that's where we come from the most offensive positions of ourselves, and you know, the littlest things people can say can be taken out of context to feel like an attack on you.
Is that mic working?
You not hear me? Can you hear me now? Okay. Yeah, so it's interesting to me. You just take on these identities, and like one of my pet peeves is always by older generation vets. Usually, they call me an Iraqi vet, and I'm not Iraqi. You know, that's like calling a veteran who fought in Vietnam a Vietnamese veteran. You know, or an Afghani veteran, which isn't even a word. You know, it's just, but it's like I don't always internalize that as something that upsets me because of me. I'm upset because there's all these Iraqis, like, and they're all veterans. You know, they had to live in a war. You know, so it's just interesting, like how we identify ourselves. You know, when I came home, I had lost my identity. I was a soldier. I was a sniper. I was a cavalry scout. And so one day I wasn't. All of a sudden. And you know, in basic training, they train you how to use all this equipment, whether it's a M16 or a SINGAR radio or a first aid kit. You're taught how to use this piece of equipment, and then you know, you're given a unit of people who you trust, literally with your life, that have the same training, and they're your family. And then you're given a mission, and you feel like there's no way you can't accomplish this mission with the training and all this equipment and this family, and you know who you are, and you know your group, and you go out, and you can't not accomplish that mission. And you come home, and you don't have proper training with the civilian society. You're alone. Your unit is gone. These people that you trusted are gone, and you don't have a mission. And I sat at home that first day, and I showered and shaved, and it's like, okay, I'm ready to go to formation. Nobody's forming up. You know, I can't go up to the motor pool and get started on maintenance on the Humvees or check out my weapon and go to the range. And I was like, what the hell am I going to do now? And I came back, I was in a hard place. You know, I took people's lives in Iraq. I was a sniper. Talk about sacred lives. And I was dealing, I didn't know what it was, but I was dealing with a lot of moral injury. My personal guilt and shame around my role in Iraq was heavy upon me. And it manifested in a way where I felt like I didn't deserve to be loved. I didn't deserve happiness. And if I acquired any amount of happiness, I would punish myself for it. And we used to, we were stationed in Germany. Ben was with me. We were stationed in Germany in Vilseck, and when we weren't training, which was often and always, or we weren't deployed somewhere, which seemed like always, we were visiting different German towns. We would jump on the train and off we went every weekend if we weren't doing duty. I think we started showing up at the train station on the weekend, not even knowing where we were going. We decided at the train station, looking at the map of Europe. And we always ended up in these German towns, and they always had castles with moats around them. Most of the moats were turned into like jogging paths and parks and playgrounds, festival areas for Oktoberfest and other things. But at night they're pretty quiet. And we were in this stage where we were finding mushrooms from a local head shop, and we weren't. We didn't think we were gonna live through Iraq. So we were trying to find out and explore and just push it as far as we could. But late at night, we always ended up in these boats, talking and in the dark, hanging around on the children's playground and just talking about war and life and everything else. And we were just so comfortable down there. We were away from people, and we just felt like monsters anyway. So it's like, this is a great spot. Let's sit in a castle mode, talk about stuff. When I came home, I felt all that same weirdness and uncomfortable thoughts, and I definitely felt like a monster. I felt like I should not be in society. I was blowing up at people at Starbucks, in local bars when they changed the channel, because news was on about Iraq, and I was looking at nameplates and unit patches, trying to figure out if I know anybody. They changed it to sports, and I'd be like, what the hell? It's like, this is a sports bar. Okay. So it's me. So I wanted to find that moat, but we didn't have any moats for me to hide into and be alone and have my space. So I went out into the woods. I grabbed a water purifier, a sleeping bag, and a fishing pole, and I left. I had the luxury, my mom lived, who still lives, on the slope of Pikes Peak in Colorado, and my backyard is the Pike National Forest, and there it was, and I came home and I was out. And it was one of the hardest and best things I ever did. Because I was out there in the woods, and, for a while it was good. I was setting up my camp and, getting firewood set up and just thought about survival and the things I needed to do, going fishing. And then it started to become just easy to do that stuff, and I was able to start just thinking and thinking and thinking. And I didn't have distractions, I didn't have Netflix and, smartphones and shopping malls and bars. And I had to sit out there and reflect. And it was a personal nightmare for a while. But I did it in nature. And your heart calms and your brain calms down. When you get out there and you get out there long enough, it usually takes about 3 days of submersion into nature before you start turning that stuff off and getting in tune again. Your rhythm becomes part of being outdoors. And you forget how long you were out there, and you don't know how long it is until you're supposed to come home. And I started this healing process. I started forgiving myself and understanding my place in the universe. And it started saving my life, the sacred land. And they always told me in the military I was fighting for the land of the free, right? And I can't think of any better example of the land of the free than the wilderness. It doesn't give a shit what color skin you have, what religion you believe in, what gender you are. Grizzly bear's gonna eat you. But it wasn't wild to me. The city was wild. Traffic and cars and business and money exchange personal relationships always seemed like it was transactionary, and I couldn't trust what people were saying to me. I didn't know if they wanted something from me, or if there's an alternative agenda, and I just had to escape. I knew what a grizzly bear was going to do. I knew what a storm cloud was going to do. Those things were predictable to me. They weren't wild, and it was so comfortable, and I loved it. And I felt like I was getting back to the roots of who I was just as a living thing, right? But the more I was out there, the more I started thinking, the more I realized that the space that I was in that little bit of paradise, was getting smaller and smaller. There was an attack and an encroachment upon that space, and it was going to disappear one day if I didn't leave the space and go fight. I had to protect that area. I wanted future veterans to get out there and heal. And if it could do that for me with post-traumatic stress disorder and moral injury, what can it do for anybody? Right? And we all deserve that space. I mean, I remember as a kid traveling, like, my family's from upstate New York, North Tonawanda and Niagara Falls, and that's where my mom and dad married. And my dad joined the military, went off to Vietnam, and he stayed in for 22 years. I moved 8 different times to different military bases before I was the age of 13 when my father retired. And we were all stationed far away from Niagara Falls. And we would take road trips home. You got 2 dogs and 3 kids. You didn't jump on a plane all the time to travel across the country. And we would stop and camp on public lands on the way there, and I never realized how much I appreciated it. But that's where I fell in love with science, with astronomy, biology, just learning about the world and what it was. Future generations have to have that, that has to be there for them as a resource. And furthermore, fighting in Iraq, I was fighting for a war for oil. Our addiction for fossil fuels here at home and our energy needs was forcing soldiers to go fight and die in Iraq and kill other people. And that just didn't sit well with me. And the more I came into Iraq Veterans Against the War and Veterans for Peace and started working for this, the more I realized is there's these root causes for war in our society that need to be addressed to end war. And the cycle is so vicious that as climate changes and the crisis grows, more conflict emerges. The fight for the lack of resources is going to cause more conflict. The disruption of people who live on coastal cities with sea level rise is going to force them to move. Famine. The entire equator, equilateral zone, is going to become unlivable. These populations are going to move, and they're going to move into areas and fight for those resources. They're going to move into those areas and fight for clean water. They're going to move into these areas that share different ideologies than them, different ethnicities than them, different religions than them. And that's going to cause violence and fighting. If you could prevent and stop climate change, you are working for peace.
Yeah.
One last story. I was up in the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge. It is the Serengeti of the North. It is the most wild place I've ever been to. I did an 8-person canoe trip with 8 other veterans, and we had to assemble our canoes, and we canoed for 12 days down the Canning River, which makes up the border of the refuge. And the end is the Arctic Sea. And we got dropped off by 2s and had to assemble our canoes on the beach. Getting dropped off 2 at a time from these little tiny planes, landing on the beach and assembling our canoes. And when I flew in, you know that scene in Jurassic Park when they kind of see the dinosaurs for the first time? That's what I felt. I flew over this massive herd of caribou that was endless.
from horizon to horizon, caribou. And there was a grizzly bear walking in the middle of them. And the caribou just gave him like 5 feet on each side. And I was just like, what is this? I got vertigo. You ever sit by, you're sitting in the parked car and the car next to you moves and you think you're moving?
Yeah.
I felt that with the caribou moving. Because the land looked like it was just moving. And I've never been in a place so incredibly wild in my life. And we saw muskox, Arctic foxes. I saw 2 Arctic foxes, one with its winter coat, one with its brown coat. I heard wolves at night. I wanted to see one, but we never got sight of one. We saw a footprint. And we saw a footprint of a grizzly bear in June in the Arctic. We finally get to the end of our journey, the last day, and we can't get all the way to the ocean in our canoes, so we pull the canoes out, we make camp, and we hike that day to get to the edge. And we find this polar bear print. We're so excited to see it. But then we realized not just that we might be in danger, but we also realized the footprint shouldn't have been there.
Oh yeah.
We looked out into the ocean, which should have been ice, where the polar bear hunt. And it had depleted so badly that there was no more ice. At that time of year, there should have been a field of ice. And we looked at the footprint, and then we looked across the Canyon River. And there were lights and smokestacks. And we were like, what is that? Later we found out it was an Exxon Valdez drilling plant. And it was a drilling city. It's so active, and there's so many people working there on a daily basis. There's daily flights from Fairbanks to that little center. And there were explosions. At night, we heard explosions. We were like, what the hell is that? And they were doing seismic explosions, looking like testing for oil. And we're dealing with this climate change that's killing these polar bears, and now it's in their own backyard. Like they live in the actual shadow of the thing that's killing them now. And I just couldn't believe it. You know, this is what we're doing to our planet. And we're just hungry for this fossil fuel. And if Veterans for Peace can help get motivated, you know, I think this is just an important campaign we got to take part of. Because there's 2 things just going to... Two things are just going to end life on Earth. It's nuclear weapons, and the Armageddon clock is about to strike 12. And any moment it can. And we've got to stop it. And climate change. We've got to do something. We've got to work with coalitions. We've got to reach out to people who are already doing it. And we've got to get involved. And I think this connected dots thing that we're about to embark on is important because they are all connected. So if you're struggling to choose which one you're going to do, it doesn't matter. They're all connected. You are doing all of them. Just choose one. So let's get out there and do it.
We are not liars. Soldiers, speak out. We have a duty to all children and to their